Well, hey, Life Point Leland. Hey, welcome to Life Point students. I hope you've got your pajamas on. This is as close as I get to Christmas PJs with the red and the green. So I hope you look a lot better than me, but I'm glad that you're in the room tonight. If we haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Joey. I serve as the student pastor around here, and we are in full Christmas swing around here at Life Point students. Raise your hand over at our Leland campus right now. I want you to raise your hand if Christmas is your favorite holiday. Put it up. Yep. I want to see all those hands. And who doesn't love Christmas? With all the Christmas candies, the Christmas presents, the joy, the music, the lights, the atmosphere. Christmas truly is the most wonderful time of the year for most people. And tonight we are kicking off a brand new series all about Christmas called Christmas Stories. And there's one really famous person that really hated Christmas. And in fact, I thought that we would start our message time off a little bit differently and with a little spice of fun. And we're going to start our time off together by singing about that man who hated Christmas. And you're going to do this live over at the Leland campus right now. So go ahead, press pause on this video over at Leland, and we're going to have a special Christmas sing-along moment. Okay, that was awesome. I think we can all agree the Grinch is the worst. And if you're not familiar with the movie The Grinch, man, you got to go home this weekend and watch it. Watch the new one, watch the old one, and it's just this story about this guy who hated Christmas so much, and because of his hatred for Christmas, he wanted to make everyone else hate Christmas by stealing Christmas. He goes into their houses and he steals their presents and their decorations and their trees and all of that to try to take their joy away. But here's what you need to know about the Grinch. Did you know that Dr. Seuss's version of the Grinch was not the OG Grinch? Did you know that? Did you know that there was a Grinch before the Grinch? That there was someone in the Bible who hated the first Christmas. And his name was King Herod. Everyone say King Herod. See, King Herod was the OG Grinch. He was the guy who hated Christmas. And he was a guy who did some terrible things. And I'm talking terrible things. Like the Dr. Seuss's Grinch, he did some bad things, but man, it doesn't even touch how terrible the things that King Herod did. And there was one decision that he made that was worse than any of the other decisions. But before we get to that, I want to just kind of paint a picture of who this guy was, just so that we're all on the same page with how big of a Grinch this guy was. So first off, Herod was the king over all the land that Jesus lived in. So as Jesus was being born, King Herod was the guy in charge. He was seen as this picture of greatness in the land. When someone thought of a king, they thought of King Herod because he was born to a popular family. He led some incredible armies, and he was even given the title King of the Jews. He built a temple that is still visible 2,000 years later. And to name a few of the terrible things that he did, get ready for this. The dude had 10 wives. Yes, 10 wives. And when he suspected evil ambitions from the only wife that he actually ever loved, you know what he did? He killed her. And he also killed her mother and her 2 brothers. And on top of that, he killed his 2 sons that he had with her. And then he had this barber who started sticking up for his sons, and he killed him. Man, I can't imagine hating a haircut that much. See, every time King Herod felt threatened, he killed the person that was threatening him. Herod was an awful man. King Herod was a sick man who had evil intentions and evil actions. And that list of bad things that King Herod just did, it's not even the worst part. So what do we know about King Herod? We know that he was king, and we know he was a real bad dude. And why did he do all these things? Why did he make the decisions that he did? And what was the worst thing that he ever did? Well, you might be sitting here to yourself like, man, Joey, I thought we were here to talk about Christmas. Where's the shepherds? Where's the Jesus being born in the manger? Where's all the exciting, joyous things? I want to hear about baby Jesus. And what you may not know is that this evil King Herod is actually found right in the middle of the Christmas story. So we're going to look at that story in Matthew 2. So if you've got a Bible, you can turn to Matthew 2. And where we're picking up this story is this story where Jesus has just been born. And so we're going to start that starting in verse 2. So it says this: Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About the time some wise men from the eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is this newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. It's important to remember right here, King Herod had a nickname. And what was that nickname? King of the Jews. So it's at this point where Herod is likely thinking, who is this baby that's coming to take my place? Who is this child that is so-called the new king of the Jews? So let's see what he does next, starting in verse 7. Then Herod called for a private meeting with the Magi, and he secretly found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report it to me so I can go and worship him too." So here's this man, this king, that's over all the land. And he's saying, I want to worship the child too. I want to go and celebrate him and worship him. Based on his track record, do you think that's what he actually wants to do? Based on what we know of King Herod, do you think he actually wants to go and worship Jesus? So what happens? Well, let's fast forward a little bit, and this is the part of the story that if you've been around the church at all, you probably know. The wise men, they have been guided to Jesus through following the star, and they give Jesus the famous gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And now it's time to leave, and they remember their instructions from King Herod as they're heading out. And those instructions were to go and tell him where the baby was. But that's not quite what they do. So let's keep reading, starting in verse 12. So it says this in verse 12, "And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route." Verse 13, "When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. 'Get up,' he said, 'take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child and kill him.' That night, Joseph left for Egypt with the child and Mary." So because God steps in, the wise men do not tell Herod where Jesus is, and Mary and Joseph have fled the scene with Jesus. But our good friend, King Herod, he doesn't know that. So what does he do? Now we're at the part of the story where Herod makes the worst decision of his life. He does something so destructive, so evil, so terrible that it will send pain throughout this land for decades. So what does he do next? Well, let's take a look and see what it says in verse 16. Verse 16, "When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, those three kings, he sent soldiers to kill all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, based on the wise men's report of the star's first appearance." Talk about a bad move. To try to kill this new king of the Jews, King Herod comes up with a plan. To try to kill this baby that was threatening his throne, Herod decides to kill every single baby boy under the age of 2. Because then this new king would have to be dead. Now that's a Grinch move. This king who supposedly had everything, who could do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, was threatened by a baby. And he makes a decision based on his fear of losing his throne. And I think at this point, it's important to understand that there was something going on in King Herod's heart. Because people don't make a decision like that unless there is something going on, if there's something that's just not right on the inside. And when I think about a heart, the best image I can think of when it comes to a heart, it's not this, and it's not even this, but what it actually looks like is something more like this. And if you're not familiar with what this picture is, this is the Star Trek control room. And sitting in the center is Captain Kirk. He's sitting in the captain's chair. And he is calling all the shots for everything that's going on his ship. Every person is on his team is looking to him for direction. Everything from that ship, it flows through him. And the reason why our hearts look like a Star Trek control room is because the heart controls everything else in your life. And I want you to understand this. Your heart impacts your actions. What's going on in your heart impacts your thoughts. It impacts your feelings. It impacts your emotions. What's going on in your heart? It impacts your character and your decisions. The heart controls everything. And just like there is a captain in the Star Trek control room, there is a captain in your heart. A captain that controls everything else in your life. The thing that everything else flows through. So the question then becomes, who sits in the captain's chair of your heart? Who is it that you allow to dictate your emotions? Who is it that you give influence over your thoughts, influence over your decisions, influence over your life? Because the truth of it is this, is that whoever sits in that chair controls your life. And the truth is we are wired as humans to want to put ourselves in that chair. There is nothing that feels better than just to put ourselves in that chair. Because it's easy to have this attitude where we say things like, man, this is my life. I'm going to do what I want, when I want, and how I want. I'm going to do the things that make me feel good. And I want you to imagine that the captain's chair, it looks something like this. It's a chair, that's all it is, but there's a lot of weight to it. And I want you to imagine that you have this chair in your heart. And I really want you to think about this. Who sits in this chair? Is it your friends? Is it your family? Is it school or sports? Maybe a boyfriend or a girlfriend? See, there's a lot of different things that might sit in this chair. It might even be you. And if I'm being honest, I put myself in this throne a lot. I take a seat in this seat a lot. Because I want to make the decisions. I want to be the one that's in control of my life. I want to do what I want to do, but am I the person that should be there? And right about now, you might be saying to yourself, man, Joey, I am nothing like King Herod. And you'd be right. Like, hopefully you're not creating genocide for 2-year-olds. Like, that would be bad. But I think there is one thing that we can all relate when it comes to King Herod. You see, King Herod, what he did is he put himself in this chair time and time again. Herod's life yelled, "This is my life. I'm in control. I am powerful. Everyone else bows down to what I want. I'm not going to let anyone or anything tell me how to live my life." And what's painful is, whether you want to admit it or not, you and I would do the same thing. We all have a little king inside of us that wants to rule everything, that wants to call the shots, that wants to be in charge. And in my life, I found something better than putting myself in that chair. I found something so much greater than putting myself in that chair. But you've got to make that decision for yourselves. So I ask you again, who sits in the captain's chair of your life? Maybe for you, the thing that sits in that chair is your love for sports, being a great athlete. Maybe it's chasing a feeling. Maybe it's what you look like, how people see you, or how you think people see you, or what you think people think about you. Maybe it's just your personality. Maybe it's your social media content, whatever it is. Whatever is most important for you is what sits on your throne. Whatever it is that when you really get honest with yourself is the most important thing in your life, that's what sits in that chair. For King Herod, it was himself. There is no question about it. There was an insecurity connected to the fact that he felt threatened by a baby coming onto the scene. And what does he do? He freaked out. And the same thing happens to us when the things that are supposed to captain our life feel threatened, we freak out. Just like King Herod. We do things so that our captain won't feel as threatened anymore. We go to great lengths to try to protect our captain. Maybe there's a new kid at school who's a better athlete than you. You're no longer the best. Or maybe you no longer have a starting spot. So you feel threatened. And what do? You start spreading rumors about them and saying things that they said or did. Or maybe your boyfriend or your girlfriend is the thing that is most important to you in your life. And they break up with you. And now the thing that sat in your captain's chair has been ripped out of your life, and there's nothing that you can do about it. And now you have to try to scramble and put something else in that chair, and so you turn to things that are going to distract you from the pain and numb it. See, every single one of us, we have little kings living inside of us. We don't want to be like him. We don't want to be like King Herod. But if we really search the depths of our hearts, there is a part of us that is. A part of us that is insecure. A part of us that questions whether we're ever good enough. And so we go to other things to try to captain our life. So the question then becomes, well, what now? Well, the good news of all this is that there is one thing that you can put in the captain's chair of your heart that will never fail you and will never let you down and will never be threatened. And this is what I want you to do tonight, is I want you to put Jesus in the captain's chair, because Jesus is the only thing worthy of putting in the captain's chair. He's the only one that should be sitting in this chair and directing your life. Not your friends, not your family, not your athletic ability, not how popular you are, not how many followers you have, nothing. Nothing else should be allowed to be in this chair. Nothing else should be allowed to sit at the center of your heart, because all those other things that I listed, and maybe even things that are starting to come to your mind, they're going to fail you. They are nothing compared to Jesus. They will fail you. They will let you down, but Jesus won't. That's the beautiful thing about Jesus. He's never going to leave you. He's never going to dip out when life gets hard. There is nothing that compares to allowing Jesus to be the number one thing in your life. So the question then becomes, will you do it? Will you put Jesus in his rightful place? Will you put Jesus in that captain's chair? And you might be sitting here and thinking like, man, I've already done that. I said yes to Jesus. He's in that chair. And I just want to ask you, is he? Is he the only thing in your chair? In that captain's chair? Because a lot of times, here's what happens is we start following Jesus and we say Jesus is the number one thing in my life, but in reality, it's Jesus and something else. It's Jesus and my friends. Jesus and what people say about me. Jesus and what college I get into. It's this Jesus and the problem with that line of thinking is when you look at this, what does this look like? It's a chair, right? It's a chair. It's not a couch, and it can't be shared. If I try to put two of me in here, what happens? There's no room. There's not enough room. There's only one thing that can sit in this chair. So if you want to put Jesus in his rightful place, if you're here tonight and you're like, man, I'm realizing that I've got a lot of things that are trying to go after my attention. They're trying to distract me. I'm going to tell you what you need to do. I'm going to give you the answer to really putting Jesus in his rightful place. Is you need to give an eviction notice to everything else in your life. You need to let everything else know that they're out and Jesus is in. You need to let everything else in your life and in your world know that Jesus is going to be the one that directs your life from here on out. And that's a whole lot easier said than done. Because the distractions in our life, they come at us from all angles. And it's hard to put Jesus in that spot day after day after day. It's easy to make a decision on a Wednesday night. It's easy to come to church on a Sunday morning. It's easy to do that. Any single one of us could say, yeah, I want to do that. But when it gets hard is on Monday and on Tuesday and on Thursday and on Friday and on Saturday, when the world is fighting for our attention and you don't have your whole youth group and your whole church family right there by you. It's hard. But what you need to do is you need to leave no room for anything else in your heart, because your heart's being cleaned, that your heart is being made new, because you're no longer going to have this little king who's fighting for attention and fighting to be the driving force in your life. But you're going to have the king, Jesus, sitting in the chair, directing and guiding your life. And when you put Jesus in that captain's chair, here's what happens. When you allow him to captain your life, this is what happens. According to our good friend Ezekiel in the Old Testament, chapter 36, verses 26 through 28, he says, I will give you a new heart, and I'll put a new spirit in you. I'll remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. Then you will live in the land I gave your ancestors, and you will be my people, and I will be your God. Since this is what happens when you surrender everything and put Jesus in his rightful place. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be anything like King Herod. I don't want to live my life with fear that whatever is sitting in my captain's chair is going to be ripped out of my life. I want to be confident that Jesus is in control, and I want to be fully surrendered to him. I don't want to care what other people think I should do or the decisions that other people think I should do. I want to have a very simple life. It's follow Jesus. Allow him and what his word says and the way that he interacts and the way that he's teaching me and guiding me to be the thing that I guide my life through, and allow him to work through my life. That's what I want. And I hope that's what you want as well. And right now we're going to step into a time of response where there may be some things that you need to lay down. Some things that you need to come before God and say, God, I am surrendering this and I'm putting you in the right place. I'm kicking other things out. I'm kicking out those things that maybe are going to fail me, and I'm going to put you in your right place as king and captain over my life. And so we're going to step into this time of response. And as we are worshiping, as we're singing all about just the importance of surrendering before Jesus, if there's something in your life that you realize, man, I need to lay that down, what I want to encourage you with is there is a note card in the seat back in front of you. Grab that note card. And I want you to write down whatever that thing is. Just write it down. Just name it. Because this is the best way that you evict something, that you kick something out, is you give it notice. You let it know that it's out. And I want you to write whatever that thing is, and then I want you to come and put it right on the stage. Don't worry about what other people are going to see or look at. This is a moment for you to physically surrender some things to the feet of Jesus. And I want you to lay that down on the stage. And when you're laying that down on the stage, you are telling God, God, you're in the right place, and I'm surrendering this before you. And so I'm going to pray, and then we're going to step into this moment of response. So God, we thank you. We thank you for who you are. We thank you for this message. God, we ask that you would allow us to put you in your rightful place. God, as we kick off the Christmas season, God, would you just help us to put you in your right place, to allow you to lead our life, to allow you to guide our life, that we would surrender things that are temporary, surrender things that don't really add any value to our life anyway. God, would we put our trust in you and know that our life is so much better in your hands. God, we love you. We honor you. It's in Jesus' name. Amen. Why don't you come forward and let's worship together.